I did my ethnography on the local AHL team, the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. The study was very fun, and I gained a ton of knowledge about the history of hockey and the local attitude towards the team during my study, and it was an extra bonus to be able to interview a few players. Before I began my study, I was able to have an inside source contact the team's relations manager for me so that I could introduce, explain, and ask permission to do my study. After some explanation and some confidentiality agreements, the relations manager decided my study was a go, so I was able to move forward. I'll start my presentation by giving a little bit of history from the NHL and AHL, as well as hockey background. Deep roots of hockey indicate that the earliest playing of the game happened around 4,000 years ago in Egypt and around 1000 BC in Ethiopia. Various museums around the world offer proof that a game that featured a ball being hit by a stick on the ground into a goal was played by the Romans, the Greeks, and even the Aztecs before it came to the New World. While the game's origins are not quite pinpointed, it is widely accepted that the game developed into what it is today in Montreal, a large city in the Canadian province of Quebec. The first organized game of hockey was played at Victoria's skating rink in Montreal on March 3, 1875. It featured two teams of 9 players per side, and the goals were 8 feet wide. In relation to today, the goal is only 6 feet wide, and the teams are made up of 5 players and a goalie. By 1893, there were over 100 hockey teams in Montreal alone. In the same year, Yale University and Johns Hopkins University held their first ice hockey matches. Prior to that, the only organized game related to ice hockey played in the United States was ice polo, but that was played with a ball instead of a puck. The Western Pennsylvania Hockey League, erected in 1902, was the first league to employ professional hockey players and later formed into the International Professional Hockey League, which was the first fully professional hockey league. In 1910, the National Hockey Association, or NHA, was formed in Montreal, Canada. After reorganizing in 1917, the league renamed itself the National Hockey League, or NHL. The first American team to be included in the league was the Boston Bruins in 1924. The NHL playoffs and cup are named after Lord Stanley of Preston, who in 1888 purchased a small silver cup for which he used to reward the winning team of the Montreal Hockey Club. The Stanley Cup is one of the most recognizable championship trophies in the world of professional sports today. The American Hockey League was founded in 1936 as a collaboration of the Canadian American Hockey League and the International Hockey League. For 12 years, from 1984 to 1996, the Hershey Bears represented the Philadelphia Flyers in the AHL. After the 1996 season, however, it was decided that the Flyers would break off their relationship with the Bears to join into a new one with the newly formed Philadelphia Phantoms. In 2009, the Phantoms were again forced to move from their home because of proposed demolition of their home rink in Philadelphia. The Phantoms moved to Glen Falls, New York, and were renamed the Adirondack Phantoms. They stayed in Glen Falls for 4 years until 2014, when they were once again forced to move. The Adirondack Phantoms were moved to the PPL Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and were renamed the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. The Lehigh Valley Phantoms are the AHL affiliate to the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers frequently choose players from the Phantoms to come up and play with them on an NHL contract. In their 2 seasons in Allentown, the Phantoms have missed the AHL playoffs both seasons, but have been a model development stage for players like Shane Gostisbehere and Nick Cousins, who wish to one day play for the Flyers in the NHL. As I walked into the main entrance of the PPL Center at 7th and Hamilton, I automatically felt a positive energy. Maybe it was the smiles from the security guards, or maybe it was the positive vibe coming from the other hopeful fans. I'd been to the PPL Center before, but I wanted to focus on things that maybe I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to focus on things that maybe the normal fan wouldn't notice on a night-to-night basis either. The most notable thing I noticed on that night was how friendly and upbeat the staff was. From the security guards to the food and beverage operators, the bartenders, seat ushers, and even the upper level employees wearing suits, everybody had a smile on their face and positive attitude about themselves. As I walked around that night, specifically looking at customer interactions with the staff, I wasn't able to find one single occasion where the staff and customer weren't smiling and having a positive interaction. Even when something went wrong in a transaction, the staff knew how to handle it in a professional and timely manner. Another thing I noticed was the energy of the building. Even though the Phantoms were having a good night on the ice, the announcer and entertainment staff still found ways to pump up the crowd even more. Whether it was the patented koozie toss at the end of the second period, or showing a guy swinging his shirt over his head during a timeout, it always seemed like the staff knew how to get the crowd wild. Looking around at the other patrons as I was sitting in my seat, everyone seemed to be into the game. There were plenty of oohs and ahs at close scoring chances and close saves, which displayed a fan base who was interested and excited about their team. Lastly, maybe the most moving part of the night for me was when the Phantoms took time out of their night to honor a man who'd served over 20 years in the Navy. As a veteran myself, the appreciation shown from the crowd and the tears strolling down the elderly man's face nearly brought myself to tears as well. There wasn't a single person in the arena, no matter what team they were cheering for, who wasn't standing and giving the man an ovation. As we left that night, I was reminded of the professionalism of the staff as we walked out of a door that was held open for us by a staff member who wished us a good night. The positive attitude displayed by the fans and the staff told me this town was very happy to finally have its own hockey team. For my insider interview, I actually performed 3 interviews. I was able to sit down and talk to 3 players, a rookie, a player who'd spent a few years in the league, and a veteran who had actually played most of his career in the NHL. I was very nervous when I stepped foot inside the media center waiting for my first player to arrive. The first player to come out was a rookie defenseman. I could tell he was slightly nervous, just like me, which actually helped calm me down a bit. After introducing my study and myself, I began to speak with him about the Phantoms. I focused his questions toward how he felt being at the professional level and what his feelings were towards the Phantoms. One question I asked him centered around his arrival in the Lehigh Valley and what excited him about the Phantoms organization. He told me, quote, "Playing for the Phantoms is an opportunity that I've been dreaming about my entire life. The greatest thing about playing for the Phantoms is that there are many players here who have played at the next level and they have so much to offer. The fans here are great too. It's a great environment to start my career and work on my game." End quote. In my second interview, I interviewed a player who had already been in the league a couple years. I asked him about his journey from childhood to the professional level, and he gave me a surprising answer, particularly about the start of his hockey career. Quote, "I started off just playing in my driveway, and my neighbor dropped off some equipment one day because he saw me playing. Then I started playing on youth teams for my city, but travel was where I got a little bit more exposure. I played high school hockey for 4 years, and then went to college where I played hockey for 3 years. I was assigned a contract to the Flyers after my junior year, and now this is my 3rd year pro." End quote. The next question was about the fan base in the Lehigh Valley and how it compared to other cities around the league. He had played in other cities, and this is what he had to say about the Lehigh Valley. Quote, "I think the fan base here is the most notable thing. The city of Allentown has really welcomed this team more than usual in minor hockey. Typically, you see 5,000 to 7,000 fans per game in this league. Here, you get 9,000 fans sold out on most nights. The community is getting a lot more involved with us, and we are with them as well. Whether it's youth practices or hospital visits, I feel like there is a relationship here forming that is stronger than I've seen in other cities." End quote. The third player I interviewed was a leader on the team and a veteran of the league. He played in the NHL for many years of his career, but was more than happy to take on the responsibility of being a role model to the younger players on the team, saying, quote, "I'm not a big talker. I'm not always in the locker room saying everything in between periods and after practice. I just try to lead by the best example. I forget who told me, but I remember one phrase and I pass it on to the younger guys. If you wouldn't do it in the NHL, don't do it here. And that applies on and off the ice. The way I am, my nature, I was always very determined to make it to the NHL. Some would say I was selfish because I tried to give myself the best opportunity to make it, and that has kind of led into this role of providing some leadership to the younger guys. I understand my role as a privilege, and I don't take it for granted. I try to do the best I can every day. I remember all the leaders I've had, and I try to take all the good things and replicate them, but I try to stay away from all the bad things I saw from other leaders coming up in the league. I'm grateful to the organization for putting the trust in me to take such a big role that requires so much responsibility and leadership. End quote. I too asked him about the city and what his thoughts were, and he said, quote, I've played in nearly every city in the AHL, and this is hands down the best atmosphere I've seen. It makes it fun to come to the rink every day and call this place our home. To be able to come to the PPL Center every night is a pleasure and a privilege. This year we've been up and down all year, and the fans continue to support us no matter what, so hopefully we can turn it around for them because they deserve it. End quote. After talking with the players, I could tell that they were happy to be in the Lehigh Valley and wanted to put on a good show for the fans. It was also great to get an inside scoop into some of the team chemistry, which seemed to be clicking on all cylinders. I conducted my outsider interview on a fan who also has season tickets who sits next to us. His name was Steve, and he's the type of fan that some would find annoying, but I find passionate and perfect for the study. After explaining the study to him and asking if he'd like to participate, he happily obliged. One of the first questions I asked him was how he thought himself and the fans felt about having the Phantoms come to town. He said, quote, I like the fact that I don't have to travel as far as Philadelphia to see professional caliber hockey. The arrival has really given downtown Allentown some life too, so that's nice. I think the town is excited to have a team so closely associated with the Flyers so close to home. End quote. I then asked him what his favorite part of the game was, and he explained to me how he obviously enjoyed the hockey, but the fan interaction and atmosphere was second to none. He told me, quote, I've been to the Hershey Bears, and I've seen the Wilkes-Barre Penguins at their arena, and I must say the PPL Center has the best atmosphere and the best fans, end quote. Lastly, I asked him what he was most excited about for the future of Phantoms hockey here in the Lehigh Valley. And he told me about how he's very excited to see young, raw talent come through the Lehigh Valley on its way to the NHL. In his words, quote, I hope to see the next Flyers superstar, end quote. After conducting my interview and going back and listening to it over and over, I could really hear the excitement and passion in Steve's voice as he spoke. He invoked the true meaning of a fan, and there were so many like him in the stands on a nightly basis. When I began my study, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew the city was excited for the Phantoms' arrival, but I wasn't sure what the attitude towards them would be once play started and was going steady. I also wasn't sure what to expect when I talked to the players. It became evident, however, as I took in more games, talked to fans and players, and collected more and more information, that the city of Allentown and the surrounding area couldn't be more excited for the arrival and presence of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. To complement that, the players couldn't be more happy to call the Lehigh Valley their home and play in front of a sold-out arena on most nights. The presence of the team has given the arena fans another place to spend a night out on the town without having to travel hours to see professional hockey be played.